and welcome to True Crime with me, Emma Kenny. First of all, I just want to say a massive thank you. I cannot believe how many subs I've got. Honestly, I've only been doing this a few months and I know that my audience isn't massive, but the fact that you guys subscribe and keep coming back and watching is really inspiring to me and really surprising. I've presented TV crime series for years. I have never enjoyed doing anything as much as I'm enjoying doing this. You guys are so engaging, so interactive, so educated in crime that I'm learning things from you and the support is blowing my mind. I just wanted to say that because I might be this big on YouTube, but it's this big in my heart as far as the way that I feel about the support you've given me. Thank you. I'll continue to make content. If you're new to this channel, I release new content every single Sunday at the same time. I'm even thinking about doing 2 a week, having a little think about that. Today I'm going to cover a case that I personally want to cover because I think a lot of the time in crime, men are pretty much covered way more than women. So I've specifically been looking for female cases that have shocked me, but also that have got some interesting and intricate factors psychologically that really intrigue me. This case also interests me because of the fact that I think that sometimes there are warning signs in relationships and people's behaviours that if we just understand a little bit more, then we can almost prevent ourselves ending up in horrible situations. The case I'm covering today is Shayna Hubers. Shayna Hubers basically murdered her kind of boyfriend, and I'm going to say kind of boyfriend because as much as she claimed they were in a relationship, I do feel from doing a lot of research, from watching the court case, and from just hearing the testimony of people around the situation that occurred, that maybe her identification with the relationship was different to Ryan Carter Poston, who was her victim. So who was Ryan before we start going into the intricacies of what happened? So Ryan was a really bright, attractive guy, as you will see in his photographs. He was, if I'm really honest, the full package, really good looking. Everybody adored him. And when I say everybody, this is so key. If you want to find out about the kind of guy somebody is or the kind of girl somebody is in a relationship, speak to their exes. Because if their exes are going to say really positive things about them, it kind of gives you that insight, doesn't it? That this human being, even when relationships didn't work out, was still somebody that was held in high esteem. And certainly Ryan was held in high esteem by his exes. And that demonstrates the kind of human being that he was. He was actually referred to by some people as a nerd. He was quite quiet, and even though he was really attractive, he wasn't somebody that essentially would go out of his way to be loud or gregarious. He was studious, he was clever, and wow, he was so loved by his family. He was born into a really affluent situation. You know, if you are lucky enough to be born into a scenario where there is wealth around you, and certainly his family was well known and very wealthy, you kind of are given a golden ticket, aren't you? But if you then get lucky enough to not just have the wealth, but to have this really close-knit, adoring family around you, you've struck gold. His mum and dad did split up, but even when they split up, as opposed to it being acrimonious and horrible, he became really close to his stepfather, and the stepfather and his father and the family themselves continued to thrive as a dysfunctionally functional family. So that didn't even have the impact that could have caused him a huge amount of trauma because it worked out beautifully. So we have this really thriving family. He had 3 sisters, Alison, Catherine and Elizabeth, and they adored him. Like I said, it's one of those cases where you look and to all intents and purposes, this guy had a gifted life, and not just a gifted life, he was gifted academically. He stood out because he was so bright. Everything that could possibly be going for somebody in their world, Ryan had it in heaps. And his life should have played out incredibly. After he actually left school that he successfully completed, he attended Indiana University. He studied history, geography, and political science, so very, very high-level academia. But then after that, he went to law school and he studied at the College of Law at Northern Kentucky University in Highland Heights. So we're introduced to not only a bright young man, but motivated. He knows where he's going. At a young age, he knows what he's going to go and do. He knows who he's going to grow into. And he gets a job pretty much immediately and he starts working as an attorney in Cincinnati, Ohio. Ryan's family was, as I've said, so close-knit. Even though his parents were divorced when he was little, he was extremely close to his father, Jay Poston. And when his mother remarried Peter Carter, Ryan thought of him as a second dad, not just a second dad to the degree that he spent time with him and he was a good father to him. He loved him so much, he actually took his name. So he actually called himself Ryan Carter Poston. I mean, that says so much, doesn't it? And those two men, his father and stepfather, they got on with each other as well. They were an extended, big, happy family. Isn't that incredible? He wanted, as a son, to express what bigger role these men had in his life. And changing that name legally, it was something that shows you that this man was able to have these really well-adjusted relationships. I mean, think about that. Think about having such a great relationship with your dad and your stepdad that you can be like, Dad, I'm going to put my stepdad's name in there, and everyone's cool with it. That's what's so sad. This loving, lovely, clever, well-adjusted lawyer with everything to live for, adored by so many. Ryan was 28 when he came across Shayna Hubers. Now, she was only 19 at the time. I do think it's important to recognise that that is a relatively big age gap at the age, even though it's obviously completely legal. There does often appear to be a power dynamic where there is an older person with a younger person, because you know more as an older person, you've got your stuff together, you kind of get admiration because you've been through more. So I'd imagine that Shayna was kind of knocked off her feet. And remember, we are talking about a gorgeous, educated, wealthy young man who's essentially very well adjusted. So she is obviously going to be drawn to him because he just has that full package. And also there is this thread of connection. So Ryan's step-cousin is actually one of her friends. And I always think that when you know somebody who knows somebody, you automatically feel like it's a safer situation to engage with. And that's how they connect. After about a month of speaking online on Facebook, they meet up and they go out. It's also worth mentioning that Shayna was an incredible student herself. In fact, when I talk a little bit about her life and her upbringing and her experiences, one of the things that was always very clear was that she was very, very studious. She was actually a psychology student at the University of Kentucky in Lexington when they met. So she was a smart cookie. And if you watch her in some of the footage that I'm going to link in, you will notice that she's a good communicator. There is a strangeness when she speaks because she's incredibly egocentric in my opinion, but she has an excellent communication repertoire. Now, just talking about Shayna for a moment, as a young girl, she talks about the fact that she struggled to fit in. Now, one of the reasons for that is that she was pretty much 12 at the time that she grew to 5'9". So she's over catwalk model height, and she stood out. People basically noticed her more, expected that she was older. It caused her issues because it made her peers not necessarily as connected as she would have ideally liked them to be. She recounts a lot in her childhood of feeling on the outside looking in. She felt bullied. She was often accused of having an eating disorder. People said that she was anorexic because she was so tall and she was so skinny. But she actually was in a position where she felt so lonely at school that when she went into the dinner hall, nobody would sit with her. And the consequence of that was that she would eat her dinner in the lavatories. So I'm not for 1 minute excusing any of the behaviour that follows. I'm saying that as a young girl, she felt that she didn't fit in and she certainly felt that she was bullied and ostracised, which for anybody is really painful. We acknowledge that. The fact that she was also studious meant that those who didn't like her because she looked a certain way then could also pin on her the fact that she was, shall we say, in the term that she uses, a nerd. But that meant that she did do very, very well. She graduated and was actually doing a master's degree in school counselling. So essentially, you can see that these are two people who, on an academic level, would realistically fit. Even though Shayna really struggled with relationships at school, she received countless awards. She had awards for academic excellence, awards for leadership. She wanted to succeed at everything she did. Simple as that. And that gives us an insight, doesn't it? If she turns her mind to something, she achieves it. Unfortunately, human beings are unpredictable, so it doesn't matter whether that's your mindset. If the person that you want doesn't want you, it's very hard to control that. The outcome is not on your level of control. So the fact that she's set her sights on Ryan, she thinks he's the one for her, she hasn't got a blueprint for failure. It's not there. If she wants it, she gets it. That level of entitlement I'm talking about. The music and drama that she was involved in, she succeeded at. People definitely thought that she could act. She was at least an acceptable actress, but her singing was incredible. One of the things I struggle with regarding when you listen to Shayna talk about her childhood is you would genuinely believe that she'd had this horrific time, because she talks about it, not with very much emotion, but she constantly talks about it. You know, she tries to find the chips in what could be a reasoning behind her reaction, shall we say. But it does seem that the people who knew her think that she had a pretty high opinion of herself. So considering she discussed the fact that she felt constantly on the outside and that she was completely bullied and that no one wanted to be friends with her, she was somebody who excelled in leadership. Well, I think you need people to follow if you're leading. You'd be a really rubbish leader, wouldn't you, if you're just in the lavatory by yourself, because it's not how it works. But again, she says that she was unpopular, but her awards would say that she was actually somebody who stood out in charge. Nonetheless, the point is, she says that she was bullied, and we have to accept that that might be something that she authentically experienced. Also, another thing that came out about her back at school is that she was very, very dramatic, particularly when it came to boys. If a guy didn't like her, if they weren't interested in her, then she would take it really badly. In fact, her friends recollect that she would take it so badly that there would be crying and screaming involved. Think about yourself at high school. Think about yourself at 15 and 16. I mean, it's hard, isn't it? You get wounded, but most of us know that we're probably going to go and do that in our bedroom, have a little bit of a sob in our bedroom. Around our friends, you know, we always try to brush it off or acknowledge it's painful, but the idea of screaming kind of gives you another insight into her personality and the things that were going on. So basically, academically, you can see that these two would have connected. Even though he was older, the reality is that they were both very, very bright. She was also an insanely talented soprano. And again, the links, there'll be some in this, but look below at the other ones, because I promise you, her voice was outstanding. Now, when Shayna was growing up, she did not come from affluence. Her house was ordinary, her area was ordinary, they certainly didn't have lots of money. So we are talking about a different level of experience between Shayna and Ryan. He basically had everything, whereas it was more complex for her growing up. That said, she has a really close relationship with her mother, and to some degree, you can see that while school was challenging, it certainly wasn't as challenging as it would be from people who came from really low socioeconomic experience. And even though she complained that her parents worked all the time, leading her to feel even more lonely, let's be honest, Shayna, they were working really hard to provide you with quite a nice life, because when you explore how committed they were to her, they were committed. But as I said, egocentricity, self-obsession, it's going to make sense when we talk about the crime. Certainly, she has a level of entitlement, which is ironic, because Ryan didn't really have a level of entitlement in spite of what he had. Now, when they get together, it seems to be that Shayna falls really fast, she falls really hard, and she wants the relationship to work. Ryan's friends say that actually he kind of was okay initially, but very quickly he felt that the relationship wasn't really for him. And unfortunately, that meant that she found out when he tried to break up with her that that was the way he felt. And this was the beginning of quite a volatile relationship. But it seems to me that aside from the very first few months of the relationship, the rest of the 18 months was really spent with Shayna desperately trying to keep it going and Ryan trying to break it up. And for whatever reason, she just couldn't leave that alone. They broke up a great deal during that 18 months. It was constant. And Ryan's friends said that, it became quite difficult for him because of the fact that she was just constantly trying to keep the relationship going. And let's put this in context. When the court looked at the text messages, they believe there was up to 100,000 messages that she'd sent him. 100,000 messages. Often, if they broke up, there would be hundreds and hundreds of texts to him. For every one message that he wrote back, there was 100 of hers. That was the ratio they worked out. What's that saying to you about this young woman? I mean, we've all been there. We've all had a row, haven't we? Wanted to text a few things, and you find yourself texting, text again, I'm going to text again. But 100, we're really going over the top. And when you think about 100,000, I don't think I've got any relationships, including my husband, where I've got that many points of communication. It's like a full-time job. What's it saying about her psyche, right? There are so many messages that were looked at and testimonies from Ryan's friends that actually demonstrated that he found her crazy, in his words, that she was just making his life a misery. He often would not answer his phone at all. He'd just put the phone away because he just couldn't handle the constant pursuing. Now, again, what does that say about Ryan? You've got to be a bit patient, haven't you? Personally, I probably have started to think, is this turning into a bit of a stalking relationship? And I'm going to talk about stalking afterwards, because I think it's really important that people understand that often what we think is just love can often be obsession. And when it's obsession, believe me, no matter how loving those relationships begin, they can end dramatically and in terrifying ways. And we see this time and time again. So it seems to me that if somebody's sending thousands of messages and only getting one message back, the likelihood is we are starting to look at a real obsession here. Now, I do feel like Ryan should just have been very clear at some point. I'm not putting any blame on him for what happened, of course not. But when somebody will not leave you and they constantly connect with you and they refuse to accept that your relationship is over, and they get to a point where they're just harassing you, you have a problem with that person. You have a problem. And you cannot flip-flop in a relationship with somebody like that. You have to be very boundaried, very clear. It is over. And they're going to pursue and pursue and pursue, and you're going to resist and reject until they get the message. And the problem with Ryan is he cannot stand the way that she becomes dramatic and she cries constantly and she begs him. And probably due to his nature, he just often allows her back into his life, which for somebody like Shayna is a problem, because that again activates the possibility of hope, but also increases the potential of abandonment. And if you feel abandoned and you feel that that abandonment is being caused by an individual that you wish to be with, you can often start creating a level of rage. Rage is something that often is provoked through feelings of fear, and then feelings that the person that you feel leaving you is causing you the pain. So if they keep causing you the pain, you can start building a picture of punishment, because how dare they keep doing this to you? Particularly if you're somebody of low responsibility, and Shayna has a low responsibility issue. And I can tell you that because she has never taken responsibility for the murder. She has never apologized for the murder. We'll come on to this later on. But she has a real problem with acknowledging that she's responsible for this murder at all. In fact, I would say that she has never even accepted that what she did was wrong, which gives us an insight once more into her personality and into the issues with her personality. America is not like the UK. In America, many places allow you to carry guns, and Ryan loved guns. He loved them. In fact, his ex-girlfriend used to say that it used to make her feel like she was really protected and that she had a real man to look after her, because he really liked his guns. He had a gun in his boot of his car. He carried a gun often. He had it in his home. So he had access to guns in his house. They were around. And whilst Shayna did actually go to a gun club with him, in fact, she did suggest to a friend that maybe she could just shoot him. Strange thing to say to a friend, but nonetheless, they went to the gun club together at times, and he really loved the sport, whereas she suggested that it wasn't something that she really liked doing, but it was something that she took advantage of, because, you know, you never know when you're going to shoot somebody, right? The night that Ryan is murdered, it seems to be the main trigger was that Shayna found out that he had a date. And he didn't just have a date, he had a date with Miss Ohio USA 2012. She was called Audrey Bolte. They'd connected on Facebook and they'd been chatting and they'd agreed to go on a date. That obviously incenses Shayna. It's all very well breaking up and getting back together, but when somebody starts seeing somebody else, there's a punctuation mark, isn't there? I also have to add that Shayna admits that during their 18-month relationship, she was also seeing other people. There was infidelity on both sides. So it isn't even as if there was some kind of faithful experience going on between Ryan and Shayna, and therefore there were expectations on one another's parts regarding commitment. That wasn't the case. But there's something about this date. Maybe it was because Audrey Bolte was stunningly attractive, or that she was somebody who had a public profile. Because obviously, let's be honest, when we have an ex, we always hope that we'll get the upgrade and not them. It's just the nature of human beings, isn't it? You don't want to bump into an ex and be like, oh my God, they've managed to meet somebody who even I think is way better than me. It's just the way we are, isn't it? But consequently, it feels like that was the trigger. When the press reported about how they met on Facebook, I just want to mention this. Why is it that women are always accused of being provocative with their photographs? Basically, that was what apparently attracted Ryan to her, that there were provocative photographs online on Facebook. Basically, you know, she was in a bikini or she was in a tight dress. You don't ever get that with guys, do you? It's not like he looked provocative in his trunks. You know, his six-pack was there on display to ensure that women were attracted to him. It's just never the way it is. We do have this way of projecting females, don't we? The fact that these open source media outlets are available mean that, you know, you put things that are happening in your life on. But nonetheless, she was highly attractive and she did look fabulous in her Facebook photos. So he was attracted to her initially because she was hot. I'd really encourage you to all go and watch the second trial that Shayna went through, because she had two trials. Basically, it was discovered that in her original trial, one of the members of the jury had lied. They were an ex-felon, so they had criminal record, and that meant, I mean, harsh, that the whole thing had to be retried.
because that one person didn't admit that they had a criminal record. So that meant that Shayna did get to have a second trial. And the first trial, she didn't give testimony, but at the second trial, she does. And I can't encourage you enough to go and look at it, because you'll see what I believe are the inconsistencies in her story, both about her childhood and also about her beliefs as to why she shouldn't be in prison. I'll leave that up to you as I continue to tell this story. Friends of Shayna said she always seemed happy. In the relationship in particularly, she was happy. She didn't really have conversations with her friends that suggested that she was in a bad relationship, that she was in a scary relationship, and certainly that she was in an abusive relationship. Now, knowing how dramatic she was and the fact that she would scream and cry if a boy dumped her when she was younger, and she would scream and cry when she didn't get her own way with Ryan, we can arguably draw an assumption that if she'd been really unhappy, dramatics would have come into it. They didn't come into it. This is only me making assumptions, but I think you always have to look at things like a jigsaw puzzle, don't you? If the pieces don't fit, it's because it's the wrong board. And in my idea, it seems that she is just somebody who, as the case has gone on and as time has gone on, she's constructed a new reality in her head. And the thing about new realities in your head is they can become really convincing. They can become convincing to you. They can become really convincing to your family and friends too. But when we look back from the testimony of her friends, it certainly didn't seem like they were in a terrible relationship together. But if you speak to Ryan's friends, completely different story. In fact, right from the start, his friends really saw that there was something wrong in this relationship. Ryan's friends actually said that one thing that really stood out with her is that immediately when you met her, she was really cold. She was totally fixated on Ryan, almost obsessed with him. And as far as she would be concerned, anybody who was around him would essentially be a distraction from the intimacy and attention that she required. According to his friends, it also seemed obvious that right from the get-go, she had a real goal in mind. She wanted to settle down with him. You know, she was having an aim in this relationship to end up being married to him. Remember, this is a guy who's successful, wealthy, he's going somewhere, you know? And she knows that if she can pin him down, then her life is going to be a good life. But the fact that she doesn't want to engage with his friends, again, what insight is that giving us to her relationship with herself and with others? Because if you want to be somebody who ingratiates yourself to a human being that you're in a relationship with, you want your friends and their friends to connect, and you want to ingratiate yourself to their friends because that gives a reinforcement. It's actually a really good thing to do. If you're really nice to somebody you're in a relationship with, mates, then the reality is they're going to be reinforcing that you're a good choice. So she doesn't know how to negotiate and navigate relationships, does she? That's not how you do it. Even though people might think that she's manipulative because she's cold and therefore distant to them, meaning that they don't necessarily feel that nice around her, it isn't sophisticated manipulation. It's childish manipulation because it actually is a counter to what you're trying to achieve. One of the things that Ryan was doing whilst he was in a relationship with Shayna was setting up his own law practice. I mean, he's in his late 20s, that's all, and he's already going for it on his own. He's really busy, he's got loads of work on, he's setting himself up, and she kind of is getting in the way. He wasn't really looking for a really serious relationship at this point. He certainly didn't like the volatility that Shayna brought to his life. And he was constantly trying to end it because of the fact that she just didn't have added value. And I know that sounds awful, but relationships are that. A relationship is about added value. How do you improve my life? Or at least, how do you maintain the level of contentment that you have and I have in our lives? Anything below that, and realistically, it should be ended. But for whatever reason, she will not let go. Now, I do need to mention that Shayna did have points, even though for the most part she seemed happy, where she was upset about the way that Ryan made her feel when it came down to breakups. In fact, there are text messages where she says, he's only with me because I make him feel so awful about it when I cry. Yes, Shayna, that's breaking up in relationships. That's the way it works. It's the way it goes, isn't it? I mean, people can be like, it's not you, it's me. But we all know what they're saying is, it's definitely you, it's not me. It's like, it's you. That's why I'm getting rid of you. If it was me, then I'd just change me. But I'm just giving you an excuse to, I don't want to be with you anymore. That's what people are saying, right? And if you cry because they're breaking up with you, it's sad. Accept it. But she doesn't, she screams, she makes scenes, and she makes me feel terribly responsible for her. And so he gets back on that constant roundabout and cycle, which inevitably is disastrous. Obviously, an insight into Ryan is that he doesn't like hurting people's feelings. We know that he's one of those human beings that everybody loves. And to some degree, I think there'd be a huge level of responsibility. He probably recognises as well with the age gap that she's got an immature reaction emotionally, and he gives her some kind of leverage for that. Because, nearly a decade is a big deal. And truth be told, he's probably thinking that she just needs to mature a little. So it might not even be that he didn't like her, it was that it just didn't work and he was too soft around being boundaried. She really, really needed boundaries. Now, why do I think that we have a stalker issue here? And this is really important because stalkers are often people who have been spurned in relationships. So let's just look for a minute at why I think Shayna has that type of personality. She's been intimate with him, so she's ticked a box there, but she desires the relationship with that person, in this case Ryan, more than he wishes to have with her. And because of that, it becomes an obsessive trait. This is when she will be constantly thinking about Ryan, fantasizing about Ryan, and they can be love orientated. But the thing about stalking is they can also be violent, vicious. They can imagine doing things with the rage they feel because they're not being accepted. They feel abandoned and they don't take rejection well. And when you look at Shayna's past relationships, and her friends have talked about that, she did not take rejection well at all. She really didn't. And when Ryan rejects her, those failed relationships, all the communication issues that she's had growing up, those become ignited. They trigger a feeling of real rejection, and that can trigger rage. Another surprise for many people is that most stalkers are really intelligent. I think that the media would have you believe that they're strange weirdos just sat in their rooms on their own with weird pictures on the wall of people. That's not the case. Most stalkers are intelligent. They plot and plan where their victim is. They go out of their way to know things about them. Take, for example, Shayna's knowledge of all his passwords. So she could get into his Facebook or Instagram and she could basically respond to people or block people that she didn't want him having relationships with. So she actually knew how to navigate through his world in this way and caused him quite a few problems with that. But she's bright. The other thing about stalkers is most of them lack social skills. Remember what I was saying about school? She's one of those human beings that obviously felt abandoned and rejected, but mainly it was to do with the fact that her boundaries are not positive boundaries. She has a dramatic nature and people don't necessarily warm to it. She's cold around people. People don't like that either, but she fits that stalking profile. And also, one of the big things with a love stalker is this belief that that person, that one person that they've pinned their hopes on, is the only person that they can ever love, the only person that they can ever see themselves spending their life with. And if they aren't able to do that, then often they want revenge because they see that person as a vessel of their pain and they feel that that person is therefore deserving of punishment. And when we look at the common stalker characteristics, let's just go through it. Jealous? Yes, she was. Manipulative? Not sophisticated wise, but yes, she was. Narcissistic? I'm telling you now, watch any of her interviews. She is a narcissist. Deceptive, absolutely. She would break into his Facebook, message people inappropriately, cause issues for him. Also, by her own admission, she does have relationships outside of the relationship. Obsessive and compulsive, absolutely. Her actions are obsessive and compulsive constantly. She almost falls in love on an instant level. From the get-go, she's completely into him. But a lot of stalkers also are socially awkward, and she definitely comes across, in spite of her leadership skills, as being that way around people that Ryan is with. Need to be in control. Well, we know that she needed to be in control. She creates situations and behaviours to ensure that he feels uncomfortable ending the relationship. And the fact that she copes with rejection so badly, again, another big trait with stalkers. Entitlement issues. Damn straight she's got entitlement issues. She believes that if she chooses something, she should be entitled to it. In this case, Ryan. Unable to take no for an answer. Nailed it. She never takes no for an answer. Doesn't take responsibility for their own feelings or actions. Not only can you see that in what I'm saying anyway, but when I come on to what actually happens in the crime, we've definitely got a tick box for that. That's why it's so important when you look at love stalking and relationships that you ask yourself, have I been or am I in that situation? So many people are in those situations, but they're not realizing how dangerous it is because they just almost see it as somebody who's desperate for their attention. But remember that with stalking, it can often turn into something pretty catastrophic. Apart from it being awful to realize that somebody's tracking you or following you or knows things that they shouldn't know about you, it can also mean that it turns into something vengeful. And vengeance is a horrific, horrific feeling because it makes you want to swipe and snipe out the human being who's harmed you. Always remember that the real difference is that love is selfless. That's the key. Whereas a stalker's affections are demanding. They're based on the belief that the stalker has an entitlement to the other person's affections and their lives. Now, lots of us have been rejected in our lives and it hurts. And these days with cyber betrayals, of course, some of us will Google our ex to see whether they're having a great time. We'll fake pictures where we're happy just to make them think we're having a great time. You know, these are things that happen. So more and more, we're seeing this kind of behaviour. Another thing that research tells us about stalking is, if somebody, when you've ended a relationship, is kind of obsessively contacting you, give it about 2 weeks. And if after 2 weeks they stop, then the likelihood is it will be okay. If they carry on, then you are looking at something that's problematic. That's what the research evidence is. So if you're in that situation right now and you've got somebody knocking on your door all the time and texting you all the time and Facebooking you all the time and you've ended the relationship and it's gone over 2 weeks, you need to take note. We know that Shayna's behaviour got so problematic that Ryan actually texted his cousin and he said, "This is getting to be restraining order level crazy. She's shown up at my condo like 3 times and refuses to leave each time." That's really disturbing. Go on, ask yourself, how often have you gone to somebody's house and when they've asked you to leave been like, "No"? Never have I done that. And I reckon that most of you will agree that never have you done that. It's not what we do. Somebody asks you to leave, you leave. Albeit you're a bit embarrassed or you're angry, you go. He also complained to his cousin about the fact that she was constantly obsessed around his Facebook. In fact, he had a quote that said, "Literally probably the craziest fucking person I've ever met. She almost scares me." So he has this insight. And the hardest part for his cousin is that he responds with, "I wish I'd said, if she scares you or if she's crazy, just walk away." But of course, that doesn't happen. He does keep taken aback. Some people have accused Ryan of playing mind games with Shayna. The fact that, you know, he could pick her up and put her down, pick her up and put her down. And if that was the case, well, that shows that Ryan wasn't being as kind as he was to everybody else in that situation. But it also shows that there's probably an exasperation to his behaviour. He's probably just had enough. He's probably trying to make her leave. If somebody is coming and refusing to get out of your home and you can't do anything about it, you're not going to be like, oh yeah, shall I put the kettle on whilst you refuse to leave my house? That's not what we do. We start being more intolerant, more impatient, even rude. Because if you can convince that person to not like you anymore, then you're not going to have to deal with the consequences of them constantly stalking you, right? So I will probably agree that the testimony that is given regarding some of the behaviour by Ryan towards Shayna is correct. But I'd be the same. If you are hassling me every 20 minutes, if you are refusing to get out of my home and you just don't get the message, I'm going to start upping the ante on you getting the message. But obviously he doesn't do it hard enough. Very few testimonies were negative towards Ryan, but there was an agreement that the relationship was relatively turbulent, and at times Shayna did say that he was emotionally abusive and that he basically would suggest that she needed a boob job and that she needed a facelift and that she was fat. But again, it's anecdotal. It wasn't shown in text messages, and she texts a lot. Remember, Shayna has no problem with texting a lot of messages, and she's also dramatic, and she's also very good at expecting the world to be a certain way. So I would imagine that if he was this horribly abusive guy, she would be like sending that message loud and clear to as many people as possible. But again, I can't evidence that she didn't experience some of that. And as I said, I imagine towards the end of the relationship, he probably would have said very much to get her off him. Because you just psychologically imagine her stuck to his shoulders, just like clinging on whilst he tries to push her off, And that's really exhausting emotionally. Questions have been asked that if she was emotionally abusive, why didn't she leave him? And again, I guess that we could argue that she was completely fixated on him. She was young, she wasn't that mature, she was completely loved up, and therefore she'd do anything for him. And it did seem that, when they were in the relationship together, she was pretty nice around him. She did his laundry, she took his dog out, she bought food for him. She definitely wanted to impress him. So we're not down on the way that she was in the relationship regarding her actions. It's the reactions to the relationship not working that provokes and causes the issues. Obviously, in the retrial, the defense did try to argue that Ryan was emotionally abusive, but asked around the many witnesses and testimonies, people were asked, was he in any way somebody who'd be abusive? Did he get into altercations? Because we do expect that. People are horrible behind closed doors and they're nice to other people, but there tends to be evidence over a period of time that people will notice something about the characteristics and traits. So if you're an abusive and violent person, it tends to be that people around you will know that you have that side to you. Not 100% of the time, maybe only 2% of the time, but they'll have evidence of it. When people were asked about Ryan, they were like, well, I've known him over 10 years and he's never even raised his voice. So it doesn't stand up to that kind of scrutiny, in my opinion. I don't think Shayna stands up to that scrutiny. Leading up to the murder, Ryan basically decides, I have to be more clear with her. I have to make it clear that I do not want to see her anymore. So he tells her that he's not going to see her again. He tells her that he doesn't want the relationship, and he says that he's not going to see her the weekend of October the 12th, 2012. So as far as he's concerned, he's kind of drawn a line, and wow, did he need to draw that line? Let's be honest, this was not a healthy relationship. What he didn't tell her, of course, is that he was going on a date with a world-class beauty. That is something that he kept from her, and I understand why. Why would you tell an obsessive ex that you're about to go on a date with somebody else? Remember, he's got this sense that she scares him sometimes. Also, we've got the drama of her screaming and crying constantly. And he probably just wants to go and hang out with this gorgeous new opportunity of a woman without the drama. Whilst he didn't tell Shayna, he did tell a friend who was actually also a former beauty pageant contestant herself, and she actually knew Audrey Bolte. So he was honest with people that he was going to this new date, probably really excited about it, but he didn't tell Shayna. As I said, Why would you? In fact, when he told people that he was meeting Audrey Bolte, he was really excited. He felt like she was a perfect match. And I've seen her interviewed, and she definitely thought that he was potentially a perfect match for her. She'd only been out of a relationship for about a month, but she hadn't done any dating. It was the first date that she was going to go on, and she just felt that there was something funny and kind, but also obviously he was really attractive and he was really mobilized as far as socially, and that is something that really interested her. Ryan and Audrey Bolte were meant to meet up on the Friday evening at a bar, but he never made it. And he never made it because Shayna turned up. Remember what I said about stalkers? They are intelligent, they know their prey, they track them, and clearly she's become aware that whilst he's told her he doesn't want to see her, he's withheld the information that he's seeing somebody else. And remember what I said about that sense of abandonment and rejection and the rage it provokes, the vengeance it can create. And certainly it seems that when Shayna went round there, she would have been full of rage. And you know that he's scared. You know that he recognises that there is something in her. He's got that insight that means that there is something to be afraid of. And he's right to be afraid. Now, according to Shayna, what happens when she arrives at that condo is very different to the reality that I believe, and certainly the prosecution believe, happened. This is a girl who has turned up knowing that he's got a date. She knows that he's exhausted with her constant attention and unwanted affection. She calls 911 after she shot him several times. Basically, she accuses him of trying to carry her out of the house, that then she goes back in to get her stuff, which, let me tell you, if you're scared for your life and you're getting assaulted and somebody carries you out into the garden, you're not like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back and get my stuff. It's just not what you do. It's not what you do. It's just not. So clearly that's not happened. It doesn't take a detective to recognise it. You'd be like off down the street, wouldn't you? Call 911, let them know you've been assaulted. But no, she goes back to get her things because, of course, lipstick in a bag would be that important during that situation. Clearly she's escalating, isn't she? Actually, what's happening is that she is probably escalating the situation anyway. So she goes back into the house for whatever reason, although I don't even think this happened, but this is what she suggests happens. And he's in front of her, and then he reaches down, gets the gun, and then she manages to grab it, and then she pulls the trigger. I mean, again, this is arguably something difficult to imagine because she's not exactly a large person with a great deal of strength, and suddenly she can get a gun out of a guy's hand who is really skilled with a gun. I mean, schoolboy error, wouldn't it be? It doesn't make sense. I just always look for things in a linear fashion. If it doesn't make sense, it's because it isn't real. So she's already planned how she's going to deal with the police, isn't she? She's got this idea that if she can create a scenario where it's self-defense, then the likelihood is, rightly so, that she wouldn't be held to account for murder. And when you listen to the 911 call, she's asked, how long ago did you shoot him? She says 15 minutes. 15 minutes.
Campbell County 911.
Ma'am, I killed my boyfriend in self-defense.
Okay, where are you at?
I'm at 12 Meadow Lane, Highland Heights, Kentucky. 41076.
Okay, 12 Meadow Lane. Are you in a house or an apartment there?
It's an apartment. It's apartment suite 10.
Is it Meadow, anything else? Meadow View or something?
No, 12 Meadow Lane. Ma'am, I killed him in self-defense.
Okay. Tell me again what unit you're in. It's not showing in my computer.
It's 10. It's unit 10.
Okay, you're at 12 Meadow Lane, unit number 10. Okay, hold on. What did you kill him with?
A gun, a loaded gun in the house.
Tell me where the gun is right now.
The gun is in the house.
Where at though, ma'am? Tell me where it's at.
I laid it on the bookshelf.
Where at? Laying on a shelf?
On the bookshelf. It's
Where are you?
I'm standing about 10 feet from his dead body.
Okay, are you sure that he is dead?
He's dead, ma'am. He's completely dead.
Okay. And how long ago did you shoot him?
I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes, not even that long.
10 or 15 minutes ago?
Yeah.
Okay, what's your name?
My name is Shayna Hubers.
I'm sorry, what is it again? Tell me.
Shayna Michelle Hubers.
Hubers?
Hubers, H-U-B-E-R-S, Hubers.
Okay, what's your name again? Shayna or Shayna?
Shayna, S-H-A-Y-N-A.
All right, Shayna, I'm just having a hard time hearing you. Okay, all right. Now, you're going to stay on you're going to stay on the line with me, okay? Because this is what we're going to do. The officers are going to want me to stay on the line with you, so when they get there, they're going to want to know where that gun is, and we want you to get out safely too, okay?
Okay, are they going to arrest me?
Ma'am, I don't know what they'll do. We're going to send them out. I'm going to stay on the line with you, okay?
I mean, I'm not a murderer, ma'am. I just killed him.
What happened exactly? What happened?
He beat me and carried me out of the house.
He did?
He beat me and tried to carry me out of the house, and I came back in to get my things, and he was right in front of me, and he reached down and grabbed the gun, and I grabbed it out of his hand and pulled the trigger.
Okay.
What are you doing for 15 minutes if you just shot someone? At the end of the day, what's she doing in that 15 minutes? She's thinking about her story, isn't she? She's thinking, how do I piece together this scenario where I've shot my ex-boyfriend? During that call to 911, it is unbelievable because when you think about killing somebody in defense, obviously you're going to be completely panicked, you're going to shoot the gun, you're probably going to throw the gun at that point and then just run like hell, call an ambulance or scream for help, do something like that. You know, that's kind of quite a normal reaction. What does she do? Does Shayna pick up the phone and ring an ambulance? No, she waits 15 minutes. But this is the bit that really gets you. She shoots him 6 times. 6 times. But after the first shot, he's slumped forward on the table. Bear in mind, remember, he was meant to be up attacking her, but he's actually slumped on the table, meaning he was sitting down. But never mind, she's not really thought this one through. But 6 times, and actually she goes around him at one point and shoots him directly through the head because she says, well, he was twitching and, you know, I didn't want him to die slowly, but I knew he was going to die anyway, so I thought I'd put him out of his misery, basically. Remember what I said about complete egocentricity, absolute self-indulgence, no responsibility? You're getting a real insight there, aren't you? So on the phone to 911, she basically tells them that, you know, she's shot him several times, and even the operator is like, why did you do that? And when she's on the phone, she's also kind of acting in a way that is very much panicking about her, about who she is. But she does try to argue that it is self-defense. When she gets to the police department, oh my God. If any of you ever commit a crime, this is an interview to watch to tell you exactly what not to do. You know how they have that little clause where they say you have the right to remain silent? It's there for a reason because, you know, when you say stuff without a lawyer present, it can get used against you. And the more you say, the more trouble you can get into, particularly if you happen to be guilty. But she hasn't got that memo. Definitely didn't get that memo. And when I say she talks, please watch some of it. She goes on and on and on. And there is a point where she's talking to this police officer who doesn't say a word. They just like are there listening to her in this room. And she's saying things like, do you even get to wash and shower in prison? Or are you just left to rot in your own shit? And will I go to prison? And it was not my fault. At the end of the day, you know, he was being aggressive towards me and I gave him the nose job he always wanted. Like, she shot him through the nose area, you know, deformed his face. And before she's even getting properly interviewed, she's saying she gave him the nose job he always wanted. Come on. I mean, in that moment, we know something is seriously wrong, don't we? She's just, apparently in self-defense, killed her ex. But actually, the way that she's thinking about it is, I gave him the nose job he always wanted, because that's the way it goes, isn't it? She's actually thinking that in that moment. She's thinking he deserved it.
He had put his arm across the table, and there's a lamp, and he had put his arm across the table and had it in my face and was screaming at me at the top of his lungs after he had thrown me around the room, and was saying emotionally to me, "You're a f***ing hillbilly. I f***ing hate you. I hate everything about you for what you are and my family." And he was screaming it, and he had his hand on the table, and he wasn't completely standing up. He was like this. He was sitting, he was enough that when I shot him, he went like this. Literally. That's when I knew he was dead. Or close to it, and twitching. And I let him, I still, even though the hurt, I still, enough of me, loved him. That I couldn't stand to watch him twitch. I knew he was going to die or have a completely deformed face. He's very vain. One of our last conversations we had that was good was that he wants my best friend who's a dentist to do his veneers and wants to get a nose job. Just that kind of person. And I shot him right here. I gave him his nose job he wanted.
Shayna also says things like, I don't know if anyone will ever want to marry me if they know that I've killed my boyfriend in self-defense. I don't know, Shayna. I guess it wouldn't be great on your Tinder profile, would you? At the end of the day, hobbies, killing boyfriends, probably isn't going to get you a swipe right. Also, when she's in the interview room, as you'll see, she's pacing from left to right. She starts dancing around and she sings. And I have to say, she's a bloody good singer. I'm not going to deny that. It's the one thing that kind of really stands out. You're like, wow, Shayna could have gone a long way because you actually had a real talent. And she's singing Amazing Grace. Ironic, bit of a religious tune. Maybe she's seeking redemption, who knows? But she's doing all of this on camera. And again, what is that saying about her egocentricity? Because she knows she's being filmed. And it's one of those traits within her, narcissism-wise, that just comes out again and again. And she very openly says that she did it. So there's no doubt whatsoever that she's owning the crime. She's just owning it in a way where she's saying that he actually did deserve it, though. He deserved it because he went to meet Miss Ohio. And so I thought it'd be better to just murder him and blow his head off than to allow him to just get on with his life, because I get what I want or nobody else gets it. She obviously is immediately arrested for murder and she's held on a $5 million bond. So she's going nowhere.
How sweet the sound that sings a rest. I'll be right back. Thank you.
When this actually goes to trial, she pleads not guilty at all. I'm not guilty. I didn't do it. It's completely reasonable to shoot my partner through the head 6 times because I didn't want him to suffer after I'd half killed him. I mean, you can see, can't you, how ridiculous that scenario is, but she wants to get away with it. And I always struggle with people who want to get away with things like that. It says something about their character. Even though you can never be accepted for murdering somebody, you can't. If somebody holds their hands up and is like, I did that in a fit of rage, I'm disgusted with myself, I deserve the punishment. It's not that you have an empathy with them, but you have an insight into their conscience level. If they have a conscience, then they will need to accept it, because if you accept it, then the automatic desire is to seek forgiveness. And if you need forgiveness, it's because you do have a level of conscience. She doesn't have a level of conscience around this at all. So when it comes to trial 2.5 years after, she doesn't give any testimony at all. Presumably because her solicitors and her barristers have watched the footage and gone, it will take a jury about 12 seconds to definitely say that she's guilty, because she just can't help herself. She's got verbal diarrhea. Obviously, the prosecutors argued that the reason that she killed Ryan was because he wanted to end the relationship, but the defense said absolutely not. It was self-defense. She was a victim of domestic abuse. And that's really upsetting for me, because it's clear from the evidence that Ryan has not been abusive. It's clear where the obsession lies. It's clear that she's not afraid of Ryan. But dragging his family through that, putting them in that situation, that's what you do when you go not guilty. You basically take the victim's family and you annihilate them with the knowledge that they don't need to have. They don't need any more abuse. They don't need any more loss. They don't need his personality and character being assassinated by a defense desperate to get a killer off. And that's what she's willing to do. She's willing to really ruin their lives further. In the trial, none of this goes down well, because there are so many people testifying that Ryan was struggling with Shayna and that Shayna refused to stand down from the relationship, that Ryan was constantly trying to avoid conflict with her, and text messages were read out which clearly evidenced that. In fact, Ryan's stepfather testified that the day before his son's death, Ryan actually confided in him about an upcoming date with Audrey Bolte, and that he was really terrified to tell Shayna about it. So he wasn't just aware that he had a problem with an ex. He was aware that if that ex found out about the date that he was going on, there could be some consequences, and boy was he right. Boy, did he get those consequences. Another reason why I absolutely know that Shayna has no remorse for this is that her cellmate testified against her. Cecily Miller said that she was bragging about killing Ryan, that she laughed about the shooting, particularly about shooting him in the face and giving him the nose job that he'd always wanted. Imagine that. Imagine being able to laugh about those things. She also suggested with her legal team that she was going to say that she was insane, but unfortunately, she has the IQ of Einstein, so instead she was going to plead battered wife syndrome. They were her words. She had the IQ of Einstein, so she was going to, plead battered wife syndrome, which actually you can't do, because in the States you have to be cohabiting or married, but she obviously wasn't intelligent enough to know that. But hey, she certainly had an opinion that she was. It only took the jury 5 hours, which is quite a short time, to deliberate and to come back with a verdict of guilty, unsurprisingly. Following the verdict, the jury recommended a 40-year prison sentence, but she will be eligible for parole after about 20. And it does strike me that white middle-class girls, particularly pretty ones, tend to get way lesser sentences than guys who do similar crimes. It's just something I notice. it seems to be that we have a problem with the idea that women can be narcissistic, psychopathic killers. But definitely when you look at the disparity between male and female sentences, it's quite staggering. Now, as soon as the trial ended, her attorney asked for an appeal. He wanted to try it again because he felt that he could get evidence in that would show that she was a victim of domestic violence, which would be in her interests because that would immediately reduce the amount of time that she'd be required to serve before becoming eligible for parole. Under state law, Shayna would be required to serve 85% or 20 years of her term, whichever was less, before becoming eligible for parole. But this did get rejected. So 4 months after being convicted, she was sentenced to 40 years in prison with a parole eligibility after 20 years as per the jury's recommendation. And the judge also added, I don't believe you. Simple as. I don't think you were a victim of domestic violence at all. And actually, I would have liked a greater sentence than 40 years. That shows you how annoyed the judge was that this situation was trying to be played as her being a victim. That judge will have sat and presided over true victims of domestic violence. They will have seen true cases of self-defense. They will know. And actually, when you look at what she did, she lied, she murdered, and she put a family through the hell of a trial. And the worst bit is not just once, but twice. Because as I said, Shayna got a second trial. And during that, she did talk. And it was awful for his family because there was loads of details about their sexual relationship, quite lurid details in her anecdotal evidence. She would talk about that. And actually, the way she tried to paint him was as an abusive boyfriend. She is unreal. She shot a man so badly that he died several times, deformed his face so his family would not have been able to see him, kiss him, say goodbye to him. Imagine that. She blew a hole in his face. She deformed him so badly, that beautiful boy's face. What was she stealing from him anyway? But no, if that was not enough, she needed to steal his reputation if she could, to make out that he was an abuser, to make out that he deserved it, to put his family through that agony. Because all that mattered to Shayna Hubers was Shayna Hubers. It's as simple as that. It took them 5 hours. 5 hours. And guess what? You're still guilty. And she was given life imprisonment, again, with the possibility of parole after 20 years. That does not mean that she will get it. 2032 is when she could get out. And it does kind of smart a little because she does not take responsibility for it. She sees herself as a victim. She plays the victim. And yet she may get to live her 40s onwards free. She may not. And her mother, actually, at the retrial, who I have great sympathy and empathy with, of course I feel sorry for her mother. Of course her mother sees her in a good light. But her mother brought up things that were so irrelevant. That her daughter had a soprano voice, which had given her lots of multiple college scholarships. And she asked the jury to understand that, you know, my daughter still has a life to help people, a life to live. She can be a good person. You're like, yes, that's true, but unfortunately your daughter brutally murdered somebody for no reason. So sadly, the scholarships, the soprano voice and the opportunity to live freely is not something that you're gonna get or should have. That again says something, doesn't it? As a parent, it's our job, it's our duty to give responsibility and accountability to our children. If you say to your child, well, you did kill him and you have taken no responsibility for it and you haven't accepted your role, but you do sing beautifully, and at the end of the day, if they let you go free and you can have a nice life, well, that will be a good thing for everyone, including society, won't it? No, doesn't work that way. If you want to bring up a narcissistic child, make damn sure you give them no responsibility. When they do things wrong, give them no accountability and basically allow them to get away with murder. In this case, that's literally what she'd have let her do. That's how we create narcissists. We indulge them. We allow their entitlement to foster. and we defend them when it's indefensible. Shayna's mum also said to the jury that, you know, Shayna was her only child, the only person that she could talk to. You're like, well, you're going to have to talk to her from prison for a long time. And with respect, she killed somebody, and the jury aren't going to care that you've only got one kid. They're still a murderer. But it shows you the insight that family members, and they have been very supportive. There's a Facebook page and there's a GoFundMe where you can donate to help her fight her case. So no responsibility has been taken here. And I will mention, you know, because I feel like I'm being a little bit hard on Shayna's mother at this point. I really do. A little bit judgmental there, Emma, going to be honest. But she did say to the jury that she wasn't trying to lessen or take away from what Ryan's family were going through. But I do think you are. Sorry, I think that you're directly trying to do that because you're trying to get the girl who murdered their son to go free because she can sing well and because you want it. Not good for anybody to not believe that somebody who's done what she's done deserves to face the punishment. It's important that they do. One of the things that David Eldridge, who was Shayna's attorney, said was that she committed the crime when she was 21 years of age and that she's mentally ill. And that essentially is why she shouldn't go to prison. Now, it's true, Shayna did suffer from BPD. That's what they came to the conclusion of. And BPD can be very complex. But let me tell you, people with borderline personality disorder or emotionally unstable personality disorder do not go out and murder people at all. There are loads of people with BPD and EUPD. I work with lots and lots. They come to my clinics. I do a lot of online stuff with them. They're fantastic human beings. But it does mean that there are certain things that you have to live with. And often, I'll be honest, BPD can be trauma-based. So it could be that Shayna did feel a little bit traumatized growing up. So BPD itself will lead people to feel very worried about people abandoning them. You don't want them to. You'll do anything to stop that happening. You'll have very intense emotions and they can last for hours through to days, and they can change really quickly. They can be quite dramatic. So you can go from feeling super happy to super sad. You don't necessarily have a strong sense of who you are. And even though I do think that Shayna did have a sense of who she was, I think she fits the others very, very well. You find it difficult to make and keep stable relationships, and there's often a sense of loneliness within you. Impulsivity is part of it, so is adultery, that can be part of it. And a lot of people have self-harm or suicidal feelings who have got BPD. The intensity of feelings can be very difficult to manage as well. And there is a possibility that in severe episodes where BPD is concerned, you know, you can get very paranoid and even disassociate. But that's a massive list, and lots of people with BPD don't have all of those. They might have a few of them. And certainly what I would say about her, as far as Shayna is concerned, I would say narcissism is a bigger part of it. But she was diagnosed with BPD, and they believe that those BPD symptoms started around 10 years of age. But you can manage BPD, you can have therapy for it, you can work through the trauma, and certainly I've worked with countless BPD clients and none of them have been violent and none of them have murdered anybody. So I'm sorry, that doesn't lead to any conclusion that there was a reasoning behind her behaviour based on BPD. Yes, she had intense feelings, but yes, you can manage those. Go to therapy. Don't pick up a gun and blow your partner's brains out. That's not how it works. Now, you can watch so many interviews. I'm going to put lots of links on here because it just is so compelling to do so, particularly when you start watching her in court at the second trial, because she could not give a toss about Ryan. She doesn't care about Ryan at all. She's constructed a reality and she's going to live that reality. She has family members support her. She has lots of people write to her because, let me tell you, it's a bit like guys, isn't it? You know, if they're pretty or good looking, then obviously how can they be guilty? And you get all these people who are just like, I'll believe whatever you say because you don't look like you should be in prison. And also she's used the hashtag #MeToo movement very effectively to try to suggest that, you know, she was the victim and therefore he definitely deserved to die. And when you're watching her, what you'll see is this real narcissism. She's really narcissistic. On top of that, she even goes in about the fact that she feels that she's getting bad treatment at times during the fact that she's been in prison because she wants to get married at some point. So she meets somebody called Unique. Unique is a transgender, so a male to female inmate, and they have this instant connection, that's what she says, and they have this really deepening connection, and they eventually do get the go ahead and get married in prison. Doesn't last. They do cite, irretrievable differences. So maybe her Tinder profile would work on certain occasions in certain places. But nonetheless, the entitlement that you'll see when she talks about that, as if, it's my First Amendment right that I can get married. Again, it's all about her. Whatever you think of this case, I think we can all agree that Ryan was an individual of great hope, would have made a big difference in society, certainly was somebody who was adored by his friends and family, and is a loss to the world. There is a big chance that Shayna will get out and will get to carry on her life, probably 50 years of it, without having to ever even take responsibility for murdering her boyfriend or her ex-boyfriend or whatever she considered it was in her mind. Listen to what I said about the stalking. If that reminds you of something that you're going through, don't do what Ryan did. Don't ignore it. It's one of those things that can become really serious, and it's cost lives, lots of lives before. People like that, they don't give up, they don't give in unless you make them. And that may even mean that you have to get the police involved, but you have to do something to keep yourself safe. Thanks for watching. I hope that you have found this particular case interesting. I also really encourage you to go and watch all the linked material because it is compelling, particularly the interviews when she's being first interviewed, so compelling. I do this every single week, same time, same place, same space. Just make sure you subscribe, give me a like and write some comments because I really enjoy them. And I will see you again next week.